The clatter of cutlery on cheap ceramic was a kind of music Liam had grown to love. It was the sound of normalcy, of a life painstakingly built from the ashes of another. He watched his son, Leo, meticulously construct a fortress out of French fries, a small, triumphant smile on his 6-year-old face. The Golden Spoon Diner, with its cracked red vinyl booths and the lingering scent of coffee and fried onions, was their sanctuary. Here, Liam wasn't the man he used to be. He was just a dad, a construction worker with calloused hands and a perpetually tired look in his eyes, sharing a plate of fries with the only person in the world who mattered. "The ketchup is the lava, Daddy," Leo whispered, his voice filled with the gravity of a master architect. He carefully dipped a fry into the red pool on his plate. "The potato people have to escape." Liam's lips curved into a rare, genuine smile. "Then they'd better be fast, buddy. That's some angry-looking lava." Their waitress, a young woman named Sarah with a kind face and a name tag that was slightly askew, came by to refill his coffee. She always gave Leo an extra maraschino cherry for his Shirley Temple and never rushed them, even when they lingered long after their plates were cleared. She saw them for what they appeared to be, a simple father and son, carving out a moment of peace in a busy world. She had no idea how true or how fragile that peace was. Liam's senses, however, were never truly at rest. He was a human seismograph, constantly registering the subtle tremors of his environment. He noted the man in the corner booth who had been nursing the same cold coffee for an hour, the way the cook in the back kept glancing through the pass-through window, the rumble of a truck downshifting on the street outside. These were the habits of a former life, instincts he couldn't switch off any more than he could stop his own heart from beating. They were what kept Leo safe. Leo, finished with his potato fortress, slid out of the booth. "I need to use the washroom, Dad." "Okay, I can see the door from here. No running," Liam said, his eyes already fixed on the short path from their table to the restrooms at the back of the diner. It was a straight shot, 20 feet of worn linoleum. Leo nodded and started his journey, his small sneakers squeaking with each step. He was halfway there when he spotted it. A gumball machine, a glorious, colourful globe of temptation standing next to a potted fern. His path deviated. Liam watched, a small sigh escaping his lips. A 2-second detour, harmless. But then a new figure entered the equation. A security guard, a man Liam hadn't noticed before, stepped out from a back office. He was large, with a thick neck that strained against the collar of his cheap uniform. His name tag read Marcus Thorne. He moved with an unearned swagger, his eyes scanning the diner with a look of bored disdain. He saw Leo, a small boy with his hand pressed against the glass of the gumball machine, and his expression soured. "Hey, kid." Thorne's voice was a gravelly bark that cut through the diner's gentle hum. Several patrons looked up. "Get away from there. That's for paying customers only." Leo, startled, pulled his hand back as if the glass were hot. "I am a customer," he said, his voice small but firm. "My daddy and I are eating." The guard took a step closer, looming over the small boy. "Don't you talk back to me. Where are your parents, letting you run around like you own the place?" Liam was already on his feet. He hadn't rushed. His movements were fluid and deliberate, a predator uncoiling. He placed a few bills on the table, enough to cover the meal and a generous tip for Sarah, his eyes never leaving the interaction at the back of the diner. "I said, where's your father?" Thorne repeated, his voice rising in irritation. He reached out, his thick, meaty hand closing around Leo's upper arm. And in that instant, the entire world shifted on its axis for Liam. The scent of coffee was replaced by the metallic tang of gunpowder and fear. The worn linoleum floor became the cold marble of a different hallway, in a different city 6 years ago. The guard's uniform was no longer cheap polyester, but the dark suit of a man with a gun, reaching for his wife, reaching for his infant son. The quiet, tired construction worker vanished. What replaced him was something else entirely. Something cold, precise, and terrifyingly fast. Before Marcus Thorne could even register the movement, Liam had closed the 20-foot distance. He didn't shout, he didn't make a sound. One moment, the guard was gripping Leo's arm, a smug look on his face. The next, a hand like a steel vise was clamped around his own wrist. Thorne looked down, surprised, then up into Liam's eyes. The weariness was gone. In its place was a flat, chilling emptiness that promised nothing but pain. "Hey, buddy, what's the big—" The sound was not loud, but it was sickeningly distinct. A sharp, wet crack that echoed in the sudden silence of the diner. It was followed immediately by another and another. Liam twisted the guard's wrist with an anatomist's precision. The radius snapped first, then the ulna. He continued the motion, his grip unrelenting, and the smaller, delicate carpal bones in Thorne's wrist fractured and crunched like a bag of gravel being crushed under a boot. A scream, high-pitched and animalistic, tore from Thorne's throat. His face went white with shock and agony. His grip on Leo's arm vanished as his hand went limp, a useless appendage hanging from a shattered wrist. Liam didn't stop. He pushed the guard back against the wall, the man's bulk hitting the drywall with a hollow thud. With his free hand, Liam gently pulled Leo behind him, shielding him from the scene. "Stay behind me, Leo," he said, his voice a low, calm rumble that betrayed none of the violent storm that had just been unleashed. Thorne, cradling his mangled arm, slid down the wall, his breath coming in ragged, pain-filled sobs. "You broke my arm! You broke my damn arm!" Every patron in the diner was frozen, staring in stunned disbelief. Forks hung suspended halfway to open mouths. Sarah, the waitress, stood by the coffee machine, a pot in her hand, her eyes wide with terror and confusion. She had seen Liam and Leo in here a dozen times. He was the quiet man who read sci-fi paperbacks while his son colored. He was not this. This was a monster. Liam ignored the guard's whimpering. He crouched down, turning his back on the man he had just crippled, and focused entirely on his son. "Are you okay, Leo? Did he hurt you?" He ran his hands over Leo's arms and shoulders, his touch gentle, checking for any marks, any sign of injury. Leo shook his head, his eyes wide, not with fear of his father, but with a bewildered awe. "No, Daddy, he just grabbed me. You were so fast." "I'll always be fast for you," Liam said, his voice soft again, the chilling emptiness in his eyes receding, replaced by a fierce, protective warmth. He pulled his son into a hug, burying his face in the boy's soft hair, inhaling the scent of him, grounding himself back in the present. The manager, a portly man named Mr. Henderson, finally scurried out from his office, his face pale. "What's going on out here? I'm calling the police." Liam stood up, holding Leo's hand. He looked at the manager, his expression calm, almost serene. "Yes," he said, his voice steady. "You should do that." He knew what was coming next. The questions, the handcuffs, the cell. It was a price he had been willing to pay from the moment the guard laid a hand on his son. The quiet life was over. He had just sent up a flare, and now the whole world would come looking. The arrival of the police was swift and loud, 2 patrol cars screaming to a halt outside the Golden Spoon Diner. 2 officers, a veteran with a weary face named Miller and his younger, eager partner Evans, entered the establishment with their hands resting on their holstered weapons. The scene that greeted them was one of surreal stillness. Patrons were whispering amongst themselves. A large man was on the floor by the gumball machine, moaning and cradling a grotesquely swollen wrist, and a calm man stood beside a small boy, holding his hand as if they were waiting for a bus. "All right, what happened here?" Officer Miller's voice was a practiced baritone, designed to take control of chaotic situations. The manager, Mr. Henderson, rushed forward, pointing a trembling finger at Liam. "That man, he attacked my security guard, Marcus, broke his arm for no reason. He just went crazy." Miller's gaze settled on Liam. He saw a man in a worn flannel shirt and dusty work boots. He saw the calluses on his hands. He saw a nobody who had just made a very big mistake. "Sir, I need you to put your hands behind your back," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Liam did not resist. He gave Leo's hand a final reassuring squeeze. "It's okay, buddy. These men are just going to ask me some questions." He looked over at the terrified waitress. "Sarah, can you please watch him for a moment? Just until this is sorted out." Sarah, still looking stunned, could only nod mutely. She walked over and knelt beside Leo, putting a hesitant arm around his shoulder. The boy didn't cry. He just watched, his eyes fixed on his father with an unnerving calm. Officer Evans cuffed Liam, the metal clicking shut with a sound of finality. He read him his rights in a clipped professional monotone. Liam listened without expression, his focus entirely on his son. He needed to make a call, but that would have to wait. First, he had to endure the process. He just grabbed the kid's arm. A woman from a nearby booth offered, her voice shaky. The boy wasn't doing anything, and the guard got rough with him. Rough? Thorne wheezed from the floor, where paramedics were now attending to him. He shattered my wrist. Look at it. He's some kind of maniac. Miller looked from the whimpering guard to the impossibly calm man in handcuffs. The story didn't quite add up. The level of violence was disproportionate, but the man's demeanor was the opposite of a hothead who had lost his temper. It was cold, controlled. It was more disturbing than rage. "You'll have plenty of time to tell your side of the story downtown," Miller said to Liam, leading him towards the exit. As they passed the counter, Liam paused. "I get one phone call," he stated, not asked. "You know the drill," Miller grunted, pushing him gently forward. They placed him in the back of the patrol car. Through the cage, he watched the diner recede, the flashing lights painting the scene in strobes of red and blue. He saw Leo's small face in the window, with Sarah standing protectively behind him. He had failed. He had broken the one rule he had set for himself: stay invisible. For 6 years, he had been a ghost, a phantom living on the fringes. Now the ghost was in a cage, and the world he had run from was about to come crashing down. At the station, he was processed like any other offender. Fingerprints, mugshot, the surrendering of his wallet and keys. He was placed in a small grey interrogation room with a metal table and 2 chairs. He sat and waited. He knew the procedure. They would let him sit, let him stew in the consequences of his actions, hoping he would be more compliant when they returned. An hour passed, then 2. Finally, Detective Harding entered the room. He was a man in his 50s, with a rumpled suit and a reputation for being thorough. He dropped a thin file on the table. "Liam Campbell, that's the name on your driver's license. Lived at 1245 Oak Street for the past 6 years. Works for a local construction crew. Pays his taxes. No criminal record. Not so much as a speeding ticket. So, Liam Campbell, you want to tell me why you decided to pulverize a man's wrist into dust today over a gumball machine?" Liam looked at the detective, his gaze steady. "He put his hands on my son." "The boy wasn't hurt," Harding countered, leaning forward. "But the guard, Marcus Thorne, is going to need multiple surgeries and will probably never have full use of that hand again. That's aggravated assault. That's serious prison time. You threw your whole life away for what?" "I am not Liam Campbell," Liam said, his voice quiet but clear. The detective blinked, surprised. "Your ID says you are." "It's a very good ID," Liam acknowledged, "but it's not me. I need my phone call." Harding chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Oh, you'll get your call. But first you're going to talk to me. Who are you then, John Doe?" Liam leaned back in his chair, a flicker of the old authority surfacing in his eyes. "Get your supervisor. Get the chief of police if you have to. You are currently holding the wrong man, and the longer you hold me, the more complicated your life is about to become. I need to make one phone call. It's not to a lawyer." There was something in his tone, a core of absolute certainty, that gave Harding pause. This wasn't the usual bluster he got from criminals. This was different. With a sigh of frustration, the detective pushed his chair back. "Fine, you get your call. But you'd better be calling the Pope himself, because it's the only thing that might help you now." An officer brought in a standard-issue phone. Liam was uncuffed from the table. He picked up the receiver and dialed a number from memory, a number he had prayed he would never have to use again. It rang once, twice, a third time. A crisp female voice answered, devoid of warmth or greeting. "Yes?" "Evelyn," Liam said, and the name felt foreign on his tongue. "It's me. There's been an incident. I'm at the North Precinct, downtown. Leo is at the Golden Spoon Diner on 4th and Main. He's with a waitress named Sarah. Go to him first, secure him, then handle this." There was a pause on the other end, a silence so profound it seemed to suck the air out of the room. Detective Harding, watching from the doorway, rolled his eyes. Then the voice came back, sharp and efficient. "Understood. Location confirmed. Asset is our priority. We are 5 minutes out from the diner. Your situation will be resolved within the hour. Do not speak to anyone else." The line went dead. Liam placed the receiver back in its cradle. He sat back down, the picture of calm. Harding scoffed. Asset? Secure him? Who do you think you are, Jason Bourne? Liam simply looked at him, the faintest trace of a sad smile on his lips. You have no idea, he said softly. Less than 20 minutes later, the quiet hum of the police precinct was shattered. A desk sergeant burst into the hallway outside the interrogation room, his eyes wide. Harding, you need to see this. Harding stepped out to see what the commotion was. Through the main doors of the station, he saw them. 3 gleaming black sedans had pulled up, their engines purring with a quiet power that spoke of immense expense. Men in dark, impeccably tailored suits emerged, moving with the coordinated grace of a Secret Service detail. They didn't look like lawyers. They looked like soldiers in $5,000 suits. Leading them was a woman in her late 40s with severe dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and an expression that could curdle milk. She walked into the precinct as if she owned it, her high heels clicking on the linoleum with sharp, imperious taps. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on Harding. "You're the detective in charge?" she asked, her voice the same one Liam had heard on the phone. It was a voice that did not brook argument. "I am," Harding said, taken aback by her audacity. "And who are you?" She didn't answer his question. Instead, she said, "You are holding a man you know as Liam Campbell. You will release him into my custody. Now, all charges will be dropped, all records of his arrest will be expunged." Harding laughed, a nervous, incredulous sound. "I don't know who you think you are, lady, but that's not how this works. He's being charged with aggravated assault." The woman, Evelyn, held up a hand, silencing him instantly. "Detective, let me be very clear. The man you are holding is Liam Sterling. His son, the boy at the diner, is Leo Sterling, as in the sole heir to the Sterling Vance corporate empire." The name hit Harding like a physical blow. Sterling Vance, they weren't just a company, they were a global behemoth. They had their hands in everything from aerospace technology to private military contracting. Their CEO, the patriarch Alistair Sterling, was a legend, a recluse more powerful than many heads of state. Harding had heard rumors about Alistair's estranged son, a man who had vanished years ago after a family tragedy. Evelyn continued, her voice dropping to a low, menacing tone. "The security guard your department is so concerned about, a Mr. Marcus Thorne, laid his hands on the single most valuable child on this planet. What Mr. Sterling did to him was not assault. It was a measured and frankly restrained response. If you continue to detain him, I can assure you that by morning, this entire precinct will be the subject of a federal investigation. Your chief will be unemployed, and you, detective, will be lucky to find work as a mall cop in North Dakota. Do I make myself clear?" Harding stared at her, his mouth agape. He looked at the silent, imposing men standing behind her. He thought of the man sitting calmly in his interrogation room, the man who called himself a ghost. It all clicked into place with a terrifying clarity. He wasn't dealing with a simple construction worker, he was a small-town cop who had just arrested a king. "Get him," Harding croaked to a nearby officer, his professional composure completely shattered. "Get him now." Liam Sterling walked out of the interrogation room. The cuffs removed, his personal effects returned to him in a small plastic bag. He ignored the stunned looks of the police officers who had been processing him just an hour earlier. He walked straight to Evelyn. "Leo?" was his only question. "He's safe," Evelyn confirmed. "He's in the car. He was very brave. The waitress was with him the whole time. We have compensated her for her trouble and ensured her discretion." Liam nodded, a wave of relief so profound it almost buckled his knees. "The guard? Marcus Thorne has a history of minor assault charges and was fired from 2 previous security jobs for excessive force," Evelyn stated, reading from a tablet that had materialized in her hand. "He is also deeply in debt to some unsavory people. It's possible he was hired to test your security to see if he could get close to the boy. We are looking into it. Either way, his career and his ability to bother anyone ever again are over. The Sterling Vance legal team is filing a countersuit for endangerment of a minor that will financially ruin him for the rest of his life." Liam felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity. Thorne was just a variable, a problem that had been solved. He walked out of the police station and into the cool night air, the world he had tried so desperately to escape roaring back to life around him. The middle black sedan's door was opened for him by one of the suited men. Inside, sitting in the plush leather interior, was Leo. He wasn't watching a cartoon on a screen or playing with a toy. He was just waiting, his small face pressed against the tinted window. When he saw Liam, his face broke into a wide, relieved grin. "Daddy!" Liam slid in and pulled his son into his arms, holding him tight. The car was an armored cocoon, silent and secure. It smelled of leather and power. It was a cage of a different kind. "I'm here, Leo," Liam whispered into his son's hair. "I'm here." The car pulled away from the curb, gliding silently into the night, leaving the small-town police station and the wreckage of their quiet life behind them. Liam looked out the window at the blurry city lights. He was no longer Liam Campbell, the construction worker. He was Liam Sterling, the prodigal son, the trained killer, the guardian of a dynasty. And he had just announced to all his hidden enemies exactly where to find him. The flare had been seen. The hunt was on. The black sedan moved through the city like a phantom, its darkened windows turning the outside world into a silent film of passing streetlights and anonymous faces. Inside, the silence was thick with unspoken history. Leo, exhausted by the day's events, had fallen asleep, his head resting in Liam's lap. Liam stroked his son's hair, his touch a stark contrast to the violence his hands had inflicted just hours before. "Where are we going, Evelyn?" Liam asked, his voice low so as not to wake Leo. Evelyn Reed sat in the front passenger seat, a tablet glowing in her hands. She had served his family for 20 years, first as his father's executive assistant, now as the chief of his security and operations. She was loyal, ruthless, and the only person outside of this car who knew the full truth of his past. "The jet is waiting at a private airfield 30 minutes from here," she replied without looking up from her screen. "We're taking you to the estate in Geneva. It's the most secure of your father's properties." Liam's jaw tightened. "I'm not going back to my father, Evelyn. That was never part of the deal." "The deal, as I recall," Evelyn said, her tone cool and precise, "was that you would be allowed to live your life of anonymity as long as you and the boy remained undiscovered. You broke that rule today, Liam, spectacularly. Alistair has been notified. He is concerned." "Concerned is not a word I associate with my father," Liam retorted. "Apoplectic, maybe. Controlling, definitely." "He is worried about his grandson," Evelyn corrected, a hint of steel in her voice. "As am I. What you did today was reckless. You exposed yourself and, more importantly, you exposed Leo. The people who have been searching for you for 6 years now have a city, a name and a face. They will not be sending a clumsy brute like Marcus Thorne next time." The weight of her words settled on him, heavy and cold. He knew she was right. The quiet life was a luxury he could no longer afford. He had lived on a knife's edge for years, always aware that one misstep, one moment of letting his guard down, could bring the whole fragile structure crashing down. Today he hadn't let his guard down. He had detonated a bomb in the middle of it. He thought back to the reason for it all, the memory that haunted his every waking moment and stalked his dreams. Isabella, his wife. Her laughter was the ghost of a melody he could barely recall, but her terror was as fresh as yesterday. They had been in Paris, living the life his father had ordained for them, a life of galas, board meetings, and public appearances. They were the golden couple of the Sterling Vance empire. And they were a target. The kidnapping attempt had been brutal and professional. They had come for Leo, a 6-month-old baby sleeping in his crib. Liam, trained in special forces before his father had forced him out of the military and into the boardroom, had fought back. He had killed 2 of the intruders, but not before a third had reached Isabella. She had thrown herself in front of Leo's crib, a human shield. The bullet that had been meant to silence her had taken her life. In the bloody aftermath, as he held his dying wife, she had made him promise. "Keep him safe, Liam," she had whispered, her hand on his cheek. "Get him away from all of this. Let him be a normal boy. Promise me." He had promised. After her funeral, he had confronted his father, Alistair. The argument had been the stuff of legends within the Sterling Vance inner circle. Alistair had wanted to surround Leo with a fortress of security, to turn the boy into a prisoner of his own legacy. Liam had refused. He blamed his father's world, the world of power and wealth, and the enemies it created for Isabella's death. And so he had vanished. With Evelyn's reluctant help, he had created a new identity. Liam Campbell, a widower and construction worker. He had taken the vast fortune at his disposal and used it to become invisible, funneling it through shell corporations to create a life that was the complete antithesis of his upbringing. He had traded penthouses for a 2-bedroom apartment, private jets for a rusty pickup truck, and haute cuisine for diner food, all to keep his promise, all to keep Leo safe. The attack in Paris, Liam said, his voice barely a whisper. Was it ever solved? Evelyn finally looked back at him, her severe expression softening for a fraction of a second. Officially, it was attributed to a radical anarchist group targeting corporate symbols. Unofficially, we believe it was orchestrated by a rival, someone who wanted to destabilize Sterling Vance by removing the heir. We were never able to prove who, but they failed. You and Leo survived. Isabella didn't, Liam said, the words like shards of glass in his throat. No, Evelyn agreed quietly. She did not. The car turned off the main highway, heading down a service road toward a discreet, unmarked hangar. The jet was waiting, a sleek silver dart against the dark sky. As they pulled up, a team of security personnel fanned out, securing the perimeter. This was the world he had left behind, a world of calculated movements and constant threat assessment. He gently lifted Leo into his arms. The boy stirred but didn't wake, snuggling his face into his father's shoulder. As Liam stepped out of the car, the cold night air hit him. He looked at the jet, then back at the city lights in the distance. He had tried to give his son a fortress of fries in a cheap diner. Now he was being taken to a real fortress, one of steel and stone and armed guards. He had kept Leo safe from the world, but in doing so, he had failed to prepare him for the prison of his own name. As he walked up the stairs into the jet's luxurious cabin, he caught his reflection in the polished chrome of the doorway. The man looking back at him wasn't the tired laborer from the diner. The flannel shirt and work boots were a costume. Beneath them, the posture was different, the eyes harder. Liam Sterling was back. The ghost had become flesh and blood again, and he knew that the monsters who had been hunting him in the shadows would now come for him in the light. His promise to Isabella had just become infinitely harder to keep. The flight to Geneva was a silent 8-hour journey across the Atlantic. Leo slept soundly in a private cabin, oblivious to the tectonic shift that had just occurred in his life. Liam did not sleep. He sat in a plush leather seat, a glass of untouched whiskey on the table beside him, and watched the curve of the earth from 40,000 feet. He was a man caught between two worlds, the simple life he had cherished now a memory, and the gilded cage of his past rushing up to meet him. Evelyn worked for the entire flight, her fingers flying across the keyboard of a hardened military-grade laptop. She was coordinating a global response, rerouting assets, tightening security protocols, and preparing the Sterling estate for their arrival. She was a master strategist, the queen on his father's chessboard. "We've scrubbed your digital footprint as Liam Campbell," she announced without preamble, her eyes still on the screen. "The apartment is being cleared out by a sterile team. All traces of you and Leo will be gone by sunrise. The waitress, Sarah Jenkins, has been given a lottery win of $250,000, deposited anonymously. It comes with the unspoken understanding that she has no memory of you or Leo ever stepping foot in that diner. Mr. Henderson, the manager, has been reminded that a health and safety inspection can be a very thorough and costly process if he chooses to speak to the press." "And Thorne?" Liam asked, his voice flat. "He's in the hospital, under guard, not for his protection, but for ours. Once he is discharged, our legal team will serve him. He has two choices: accept a settlement that includes a permanent, unbreakable non-disclosure agreement, or face a lawsuit that will leave him destitute and in court for the next decade. He'll take the money." It was all so clean, so efficient. Problems were not solved, they were erased with money and power. This was the world Alistair Sterling had built, a world where consequences were for other people. It was the very thing Liam had grown to despise. "Has my father said anything?" Liam asked, dreading the answer. He wants to see you, both of you, as soon as you land, Evelyn confirmed. Liam closed his eyes. The thought of facing his father filled him with a cold anger. Alistair Sterling was a man forged from ambition and control. He saw people, even his own family, as assets to be managed or liabilities to be contained. After Isabella's death, Liam had become a liability, a grieving, unpredictable son who rejected everything his father stood for. And Leo was the ultimate asset, the continuation of the Sterling line. When the jet finally touched down on a private runway nestled in the Swiss Alps, the sun was just beginning to rise, painting the snow-capped peaks in hues of pink and gold. The air was crisp and clean, a stark contrast to the gritty city air he had grown accustomed to. A convoy of armored vehicles was waiting on the tarmac. This was not a homecoming, it was an extraction. The Sterling estate was less a house and more a modern-day castle, a fortress of glass, steel, and granite built into the side of a mountain. It was surrounded by acres of private forest, monitored by thermal cameras, motion sensors, and patrols of silent, black-clad guards. It was the safest place on Earth, and the loneliest. Liam carried the still sleeping Leo from the car into the cavernous main hall. The interior was cold and minimalist, filled with priceless modern art that did little to warm the space. And standing there, at the base of a floating glass staircase, was his father. Alistair Sterling was in his late 70s, but he looked a decade younger. He was tall and impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his silver hair perfectly coiffed. His eyes, a pale, piercing blue, were the same as Liam's. They surveyed his son and grandson with an unreadable expression. "You've been careless," Alistair said. It wasn't a greeting, it was an indictment. "I kept him safe," Liam countered, his voice tight with resentment. He shifted Leo in his arms, a protective gesture. "Safe? Living in squalor, surrounded by common criminals and degenerates. You call that safe?" Alistair's voice was sharp, cutting. "You exposed him to a random, pointless threat in a greasy spoon, and you responded like a thug. You could have been killed. He could have been taken. The only time he was ever in real danger was when he was living in your world," Liam shot back. "Isabella is dead because of your world, your enemies." Alistair's face hardened, the first crack in his iron composure. Isabella's death was a tragedy. But hiding from the world is not a strategy, it's cowardice. You are a Sterling. That name comes with power, responsibility, and yes, danger. You don't run from it. You master it. You control it. He took a step closer, his eyes finally softening as he looked at the sleeping boy in Liam's arms. "He looks like her," Alistair said, his voice dropping almost to a whisper. It was the closest he would ever come to an admission of grief. "He is her son," Liam said, "and I will not let you turn him into you." "I will turn him into a survivor," Alistair replied, his voice regaining its strength. "He will be trained. He will be educated. He will have the finest security, the best tutors. He will learn what it means to be a Sterling, and he will be ready for the world that will one day be his." A battle of wills raged in the silent hall, a father and son locked in a conflict that had simmered for 6 years. But Liam was tired. He had been on high alert for too long. He had his son in his arms, and for the first time in a long time, he was in a place where he didn't have to check the windows or watch the doors. He was a prisoner here, but so was the danger. "He needs to rest," Liam said, sidestepping the argument for now. He started towards the staircase. "His room is prepared," Alistair said to his back, and Liam, "Welcome home." The words were meant to be conciliatory, but to Liam they sounded like the closing of a cell door. He carried Leo up the stairs and down a long, sterile hallway to a room that was more like a luxury hotel suite. It had a bed, toys that had been carefully selected for educational value, and a floor-to-ceiling bulletproof window with a breathtaking view of the mountains. He gently laid Leo on the bed and pulled the covers over him. He sat on the edge of the bed, watching his son sleep, the picture of innocence in a world that was anything but. The diner, Sarah, the life he had known. It all felt like a dream. Later that day, Evelyn found him in the estate's library, a vast 2-story room filled with thousands of books he knew his father had never read. "We have a preliminary report on Thorn," she said, holding out a tablet. Liam took it. The screen showed a dossier, Marcus Thorn, 42. Dishonorably discharged from the army, a string of failed jobs. And then, the interesting part, a series of large, untraceable cash deposits into his bank account over the last 3 months. The source was a shell corporation that, after several layers of obfuscation, led back to one of Sterling Vance's primary competitors, a ruthless conglomerate called Meridian Global. Meridian, Liam breathed the name. Their CEO, Julian Croft, was a man who viewed business as warfare. He and Alistair had been bitter rivals for decades. "The working theory is that Croft has been trying to locate you," Evelyn explained. "He couldn't risk a direct move against Alistair, but finding his lost son and heir, that would be the ultimate leverage. Thorn wasn't trying to kidnap Leo, not yet. He was a probe. His instructions were likely to provoke you, to create an incident, to confirm your identity and test your reactions. He just wasn't prepared for how you would react." Liam's blood ran cold. The incident at the diner wasn't random. It was the opening move in a war he didn't even know he was fighting. He had walked right into their trap. By protecting Leo, he had painted a target on his back a mile wide. "So Croft knows," Liam said. "He knows," Evelyn confirmed. "And now that he's found you, he will not stop. This is no longer about hiding, Liam. This is about fighting back. Your father is already preparing a corporate response, but the other side of this war, that will be up to you." Liam looked out the library window at the pristine, peaceful mountain landscape. It was a beautiful prison. He had tried to protect his son by building a small, quiet world. Now he realized his mistake. You couldn't build a wall high enough to keep the real monsters out. The only way to protect Leo was to leave the sanctuary, to walk back onto the battlefield, and to eliminate the threat for good. The ghost was about to become a hunter. The days that followed settled into a strange and unsettling routine. For Leo, it was a world of wonders. He had a playroom the size of their old apartment, a chef who could make pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, and a sprawling forest to explore, always accompanied by 2 silent, watchful guards. He was too young to understand the invisible walls of his new home, to see the cage beneath the gilding. He only knew that he was with his father, and for him, that was enough. For Liam, the estate was a pressure cooker. He was caught in a silent war with his father. Alistair wanted to immediately immerse Leo in the sterling way of life. Language tutors, etiquette lessons, introductions to strategic board games. Liam resisted at every turn, fighting to preserve the last vestiges of his son's normal childhood. Their conversations were clipped, tense negotiations over a boy's soul. Meanwhile, Evelyn fed him a steady stream of intelligence. Julian Croft and Meridian Global were making moves. Subtle corporate attacks, cyber probes on Sterling Vance's network, and whispers in the financial world about the reappearance of the lost Sterling heir. Croft was testing their defenses, looking for a weakness. "He's not just after the company," Liam said one evening, pacing the floor of the estate's high-tech command center, a room Evelyn had established as their nerve center. "He's making this personal. He wants Leo." "Leverage," Evelyn stated, her eyes scanning a dozen monitors, displaying encrypted data streams. "If he controls the heir, he controls the future of the empire. He could force a merger, dismantle Sterling Vance from the inside. For him, this is the endgame of a 30-year rivalry." Liam felt a familiar cold rage building inside him. The same rage he had felt in the diner, but now it was focused, honed to a razor's edge. He had spent 6 years suppressing the man he used to be, the soldier. But that man was wide awake now. The first direct threat came a week after their arrival. A new tutor had been hired for Leo, a specialist in early childhood education named Anja. She was vetted, her background checked a dozen times over by Evelyn's team. She was charming, and Leo adored her instantly. It was Liam who noticed the inconsistencies. A slight, almost undetectable accent that shifted between German and Russian. The way her eyes scanned a room, not with the gentle gaze of a teacher, but with the constant, subtle assessment of a trained operative. The way she flinched almost imperceptibly when a door slammed shut. He didn't confront her. Instead, he went to Evelyn. "Run a deep background on the tutor. Biometrics, voice analysis, satellite imagery of her past known locations, cross-reference her file with every intelligence database we have access to. I want to know who she prayed to as a child. Evelyn, ever the professional, didn't question his paranoia. The sterling fortune bought access to resources that rivaled government agencies. Within hours, they had their answer. Anya's real name was Irina Volkov, a former agent of a defunct Eastern Bloc intelligence service, now a freelance operative specializing in infiltration and extraction. She was one of the best in the world. Meridian had managed to insert her into the most secure private residence in Europe. The realization was chilling. The enemy was already inside the gates. "She hasn't made a move," Evelyn said, her face grim. "She's observing, learning routines, waiting for an opportunity. She's waiting for Leo to be comfortable with her, to trust her completely." "We're not giving her that opportunity," Liam said, the command in his voice absolute. "Lock down the estate, no one in or out. Put Leo's personal detail on high alert. I'll handle Irina." That evening, Liam found her in the library, ostensibly selecting a book for Leo's bedtime story. The estate was deceptively quiet, but Liam could feel the tension, the unseen guards moving into position, the silent lockdown protocols engaging. "The story of Icarus," Liam said, walking up behind her, "an interesting choice. A cautionary tale about flying too close to the sun." Irina turned, a placid smile on her face. "It teaches children about the importance of listening to their parents. It also teaches about the consequences of hubris," Liam countered, his eyes locking onto hers. "Thinking you can infiltrate a place like this, get close to my son, and not get burned." The smile on her face didn't falter, but her eyes went cold. The mask of the gentle tutor fell away, revealing the professional beneath. "I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Sterling." "I know who you are, Irina," Liam said softly. "I know who you work for. So this is how it's going to go. You are going to walk out of this room, you will be escorted to a vehicle, and you will leave. You will tell Julian Croft that you failed. You will tell him this place is impenetrable and the boy is untouchable. If you ever come near my son again, or if I even hear your name whispered on the wind, I will find you. And the last story you hear will not be for children." His threat was delivered without heat, a simple statement of fact that was more terrifying than any shout. She held his gaze for a long moment, a silent battle of wills. Then she gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. She placed the book back on the shelf and walked out of the library, where two of Evelyn's guards were waiting to escort her off the property. Liam knew it wasn't over. This was just a feint, a test. Croft now knew that Liam was not just a grieving father, but a formidable opponent. The next attack would be more direct, and it would likely come from outside the fortress walls. His prediction came true 2 days later. He had taken Leo for a walk in the woods on the edge of the estate property. They were accompanied by 4 guards, but Liam insisted on giving his son a semblance of freedom, letting him run ahead on the path. Liam's senses were on fire, every snapped twig, every bird call registering in his mind. The attack came without warning, not with guns, but with a high-frequency sonic device that emitted a piercing, disorienting pulse. The guards cried out, clutching their heads, their communications jammed. Liam, whose training had included resisting such tactics, fought through the wave of nausea and pain. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard the whir of drones. 3 of them, small, fast and black, descended from above the tree line. They weren't armed with missiles, but with nets and tranquilizer dart launchers. They weren't trying to kill him. They were trying to abduct his son. "Leo, get down," Liam roared. He drew the concealed pistol he now wore at all times and fired 2 precise shots, shattering the camera lens of the nearest drone. It wobbled and crashed into a tree. He sprinted towards Leo, who had dropped to the ground as he'd been taught. A tranquilizer dart hissed past Liam's ear. He scooped Leo up in one arm, never breaking stride, and plunged into the dense forest off the path. The 2 remaining drones swarmed after them, their propellers chopping at the leaves. This was his element. Not the sterile hallways of the estate, but the chaos of the wilderness. He moved through the trees with a speed and silence that defied his size, using the terrain as both weapon and shield. He slid down a steep, muddy embankment, using his body to shelter Leo from the fall. He came up behind a thicket of ancient pines, the drones momentarily losing their line of sight. He had seconds. He set Leo down behind a large rock. "Stay here. Don't make a sound until I come back for you. You understand?" Leo, his face pale but his eyes resolute, nodded. He had his mother's courage. Liam burst from the trees, drawing their fire. He was the target now. He led them on a chase, deeper into the woods, away from his son. A dart grazed his shoulder, the tranquilizer burning in his veins, a sluggishness seeping into his limbs. He fought it, adrenaline and sheer will keeping him on his feet. He found what he was looking for, a narrow ravine, barely 5 feet wide. He leapt across it. The drones, following their programming, tried to follow. The first one, moving too fast, clipped a branch and spun out of control, crashing into the ravine wall. The second one slowed, hovering over the chasm. That was the mistake he was counting on. With the last of his strength, Liam grabbed a heavy dead branch and hurled it like a spear. It struck the drone's rotor, shattering the plastic blades. The machine fell from the sky with a pathetic whine and smashed on the rocks below. Silence. The sonic pulse had stopped. His guards would be recovering, calling for backup. He stumbled back to the rock where he had left Leo. The tranquilizer was taking hold, his vision blurring at the edges. He found his son, safe, curled into a tight ball. "Daddy," Leo whispered, running to him. Liam fell to one knee, pulling the boy into a hug. "I'm here," he gasped, his strength failing. "You're safe." He collapsed onto the forest floor, his last conscious thought of his son's small hand on his face. When he awoke, he was in the estate's medical wing, Evelyn and his father standing over him. "The drones were Meridian tech," Evelyn said. "Croft is escalating. He's no longer testing us. He's actively trying to take the boy." Liam sat up, shaking off the last of the drug's effects. He looked at his father. The mask of the cold businessman was gone. Alistair Sterling looked his age. He looked scared. "This is my fault," Alistair said, his voice gravelly. "My war with Croft has put my grandson in the crosshairs. I tried to control things from a distance, with money and power. I was wrong." He looked at Liam, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "You have been keeping him safe. Your way. Now we do it together." For the first time in years, the wall between them crumbled. They were not CEO and estranged son. They were a father and a grandfather, united by their love for a child and their hatred for a common enemy. "Croft won't stop," Liam said. "He'll keep coming for Leo as long as he's here. We've been on the defensive. It's time to go on the attack." Alistair nodded slowly. "What do you need?" Liam's eyes hardened. The time for hiding was over. The time for running was over. The hunt was on, but the roles were about to be reversed. "I need your resources," Liam said, his voice like flint. "I need your intelligence network, your access, your technology. And then, I need you to get out of my way. I'm not going to neutralize Julian Croft's business. I'm going to dismantle his entire life. I'm going to take away everything he has, and then I'm going to find him. This ends. Now." Alistair Sterling looked at the son he had tried to mold, the soldier he had tried to suppress. And for the first time, he saw not a disappointment or a rebel, but the true heir to his empire. A man with his own ruthless will, tempered by a love Alistair had only dimly understood. He saw a protector. "Give him whatever he wants," Alistair said to Evelyn. The war had a new general. The shift was immediate and absolute. Liam was no longer a resident of the estate, he was its commander. The command center became his domain. With Evelyn as his second-in-command and the full unfathomable resources of Sterling Vance at his disposal, he began to wage a new kind of war against Julian Croft. It was silent, digital, and utterly devastating. He didn't target Meridian Global's stock price or their public contracts. That was his father's way. Liam's approach was surgical, personal. He targeted the foundations of Croft's power. He used satellite surveillance and financial tracking to identify Croft's key lieutenants, the ruthless inner circle that executed his orders. One by one, their lives began to unravel. The head of Croft's security found his offshore accounts, filled with embezzled funds, leaked to international authorities. The chief of R&D, who had stolen patents to build Meridian's tech division, was exposed by an anonymous data dump to a consortium of tech journals. Croft's lead lobbyist was ruined when recordings of him bribing a senator were sent to the Justice Department. Liam didn't just expose them, he used their own corruption against them, turning Croft's weapons back on their master. Julian Croft, isolated in his own penthouse headquarters, grew increasingly paranoid. His most trusted people were being arrested, disgraced, or were turning on each other. His empire was crumbling from the inside out, not from a frontal assault, but from a cancer that Liam had expertly injected into its heart. While the digital war raged, Liam made a critical change to his own life. He refused to let Leo remain a prisoner. He knew that the only true safety was not in hiding, but in being prepared. He began to train his son, not in combat, but in awareness. They played games in the woods that were really lessons in tracking and evasion. Find the red leaf was a lesson in spotting something that was out of place. Hide from Daddy became a drill in using cover and concealment. He taught Leo how to recognize the sound of a drone, how to tell if a car was following them, how to stay calm under pressure. He was arming his son not with a weapon, but with knowledge, the same instincts that had kept him alive for years. Alistair watched this transformation with a mixture of pride and apprehension. He saw his grandson growing more confident, more resilient. He also saw Liam becoming more like the man he had been in the Special Forces, focused, relentless, and dangerous. The final piece of Liam's plan was the most audacious. He located Croft's most valuable and secret asset, a hidden data haven in Iceland that housed all of Meridian's illegal dealings, corporate espionage files, and blackmail material on politicians and rivals. It was Croft's ultimate insurance policy. Taking it wouldn't just cripple him, it would erase him. The facility was considered impenetrable, but Liam wasn't going to assault it. He was going to use the one weakness he had discovered in all of his research, Julian Croft's monumental ego. Through a series of carefully orchestrated leaks, Liam's team created a false narrative. They made it seem as though a rogue element within Meridian was planning to sell the data from the Iceland facility to the highest bidder. They planted evidence suggesting the betrayal was imminent. As Liam predicted, Croft didn't trust anyone else to handle the situation. He boarded his private jet and flew to Iceland himself to personally secure his data, his paranoia overriding his caution. It was the first time he had left his secure fortress in weeks. Liam was waiting for him. He wasn't there with a team of commandos. He was alone. He had used his father's aerospace connections to get him into the country undetected. He tracked Croft from the airfield to the remote data facility, a brutalist concrete structure set against a landscape of volcanic rock and ice. He let Croft enter the facility and initiate the lockdown sequence. Then, using a piece of malware his team had designed, Liam triggered a system-wide failure, trapping Croft inside his own vault. The power cut out, the communications went dead, the emergency doors sealed shut with a ton of reinforced steel. Liam didn't go in. He simply walked to the facility's external communications hub and patched in his satellite phone. He dialed a number. Inside the dark, cold vault, a single emergency phone began to ring. Croft, panicked and alone, snatched it up. "Who is this? What's happening?" "Hello, Julian." Liam's voice was calm, echoing in the confined space. "You've been trying to get my attention. You have it." There was a stunned silence on the other end. "Sterling? How?" "You came after my son," Liam said, his voice dropping, the cold fury unmistakable. "You thought he was a pawn in your game with my father. You were wrong. He is not a piece on a board. He is the reason the board exists. You sent thugs and assassins into his life, so I've taken you out of yours." "What have you done?" Croft screamed, his voice filled with terror. "Your vault is now your tomb, Julian. The emergency power will last for about a week if you're careful. Enough time to reflect on your mistakes. In 1 hour, an anonymous tip will be sent to every major intelligence agency in the world. It will contain the exact location of this facility and a master key to decrypt about 1% of the data stored here. Just enough to get their attention. They will spend the next year tearing this place and your legacy apart." "You can't just leave me here," Croft pleaded, his arrogance replaced by raw fear. "I can," Liam said, his voice utterly devoid of emotion. You put a price on my son's head. You don't get to walk away from that. You should have stayed away from my family." He hung up the phone. He walked away from the concrete bunker without looking back, leaving Julian Croft to his fate, buried alive with all his secrets. When Liam returned to Geneva, the world was already reacting. News reports were buzzing about the discovery of the Meridian data haven. Julian Croft was reported missing. His company was in freefall, besieged by federal agents and lawsuits. The threat was over. He found his father and Leo in the garden. Leo was showing his grandfather how to identify different types of pine cones. Alistair was crouched down, listening with rapt attention, a genuine smile on his face. He looked up as Liam approached. He didn't need to ask. He saw it in his son's eyes. It was finished. "So what now?" Alistair asked, his voice quiet. Liam looked at Leo, who ran over and hugged his leg. He scooped him up, holding him close. The quiet life of Liam Campbell was gone forever. But maybe they could build a new kind of life. Not one of hiding, but one of strength. Not a fortress of stone, but a fortress of family. "Now," Liam said, looking from his father to his son, "we live. But we do it our way. No more running, no more hiding. We are Sterlings. It's time we started acting like it. Together." He stood there, between the patriarch and the heir, the past and the future. The quiet construction worker and the ruthless soldier had finally merged into one man. A father who had torn down an empire to protect his son, and who would rebuild a new world for him, a world where he would never have to be afraid again.